But we always have to know when politics is failing us. We always know, rather, when politics is failing us. We can feel it, because it has no resonance. And this isn't just about the number of voters that turn out. Actually, turnout hasn't fallen, though people keep saying it's going to fall. It hasn't fallen that dramatically at general elections over the last couple of decades. It's not even about the esteem in which we hold politicians. We've always despised politicians. You go back to Dickens and before, and you get the accounts of politicians which are vile. But we can see the failure in the dramatic fall, for example, in party political membership. And we can see the failure in the world in which I work, in the gaps in the polity. Last election, 2005, there was 62% turnout overall. Amongst ethnic minority Britons, turnout was 47%. 47%. Vast levels of under-registration, some groups, the majority of people not registered. There's an absence of representation of some groups, and I'm talking, because this is my business, about ethnic minority groups. The proportion of local councillors over the last 6 years who come from ethnic minority communities has fallen. It was rising for 2 decades. It started to fall. Part of the reason, of course, is because Labour has lost so many seats in local councils. But the fact is, that shouldn't be the case. Because you are black or Asian or Chinese doesn't necessarily mean that you must be Labour. That's a tendency in this country. There's no particular reason why that fall should have taken place. The number of public appointees is down. In Westminster, if we had a proportion of our members of Parliament which reflected the minority population of this country, we would have 60 plus minority MPs. Today we have 15. In a London Assembly, representing a city which is 1/3 black or brown, there are 25 Assembly members. I was the first chair, so I had to sit and look at this. There are 25 Assembly members. In a city 1/3 black or brown, as I say, we have 2 minority Assembly members. In Scotland, 0. In Wales, 0. A small number in Brussels, about half a dozen or so. You can make the same point, for example, about gender balance in the House of Commons. I think now 120, 125 members of Parliament out of 650, well, 649. The numbers speak for themselves. I did some work, or commissioned some work earlier on this year, which looked at how long it would take our Parliament to get to a place where it was truly representative across all of these dimensions. At the rate we are adding women members to the House of Commons, it will be the next century, before we are truly representative on a gender basis. And actually, ethnic minorities are slightly better off. It's only going to take till 2085 at the current rate till we have a representative Parliament. The problem of this, of course, is a very simple one. Any democracy doesn't rest just on the numbers. It doesn't just rest on the theory. It rests on the perception that it is legitimate. And one of our growing difficulties, I think, is that in an era when people's identity, their gender, their race, their faith and so on are more and more important, a representative democracy that does not represent those identities begins to lose its legitimacy. I want to come back to that in a moment. But this has become a central issue, I think, for this country, and indeed for most of Europe. The reason is that there are two, in my view, there are two great issues that will confront humankind between now and the end of the 21st century. The first is, how do we live with our planet? And, you know, anybody who has ever seen Al Gore speaking and survived 10 minutes, he is the most boring politician you can ever imagine. Well, ask yourself how it is that millions of people in the lowest attention span country in the West, the United States, will go to watch a film of 100 minutes of Al Gore talking about climate change. And it's going to happen in Europe, where they can't even speak the language, never mind, you know, put up with his boringness. And the reason is because everybody knows this is one of the big challenges for us. And Gore, give him his credit and give his directors credit, has found a way of dramatizing this. I haven't seen the film, but I've seen some extracts from it, and it's basically a lecture. I mean, how many of you are going to turn up for a lecture for Al Gore? We're going to turn up a lecture for, sorry, I know there are members of staff, faculty here, but you know, I don't imagine that all of you rush at 100 miles an hour for this. But that's because we think this is so important. So the first challenge is how we live with our planet. The second challenge is actually how we live with each other. And I want to spend most of my time talking about the latter, because that is the business that I am in. But I want to just, before I do that, say this. These two things are intimately related. When I talk about how we live with each other, one of the aspects and the difficulty about how we live with each other is how we live with people who are very different from us. And here I'm talking immigration, here I'm talking about what people now call ethnic diversity and so on. We need to understand that's going to increase. And one of the reasons it's going to increase is because it's being driven by movement of people from, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, and because of the desertification of the center of Africa. People are moving, they're moving, they're moving. That is why young men will get on boats on the west coast of Africa, which are leaky old tubs, which they know could go down if it gets a little bit stormy. They will get all the way to an island off Spain. They will be put in camps behind barbed wire because they've been captured by the Coast Guard. They will be sent back to Africa, to the places where they came from, and they will do it all over again. Because even though they know that while they've been away, some other bunch of unfortunate souls have gone on another boat which wasn't lucky and which sank, in which dozens died. And they are doing it every year in hundreds, now thousands, if you listen to the Italians and the Spanish. And that's because changing climate, poverty, is driving them. It's driving them to us, to Europe. The United Nations tells us that 191 million people live and work outside the country of their birth. 60% of those 191 million people have come to live and work in the developed West. They are people who are, generally speaking, doing worse jobs, being exploited and so on. But they are alive, and they come from places where perhaps they wouldn't have been alive for much longer. This is a movement of humanity. 25 years ago, that number of 191 million was half that. 25 years from now, it'll be more than double that.